Hello.
I found out my husband was cheating on me. After that, he took our savings from the past 10 years. He ran away, leaving me with nothing. After all those long nights and putting in way more than was expected, my hard work had finally paid off. I'd received a decent bonus at work, and my mind instantly filled with ideas about what I could finally afford. The first thought? Emma's birthday. She was turning 12, and I wanted it to be something she'd remember. I decided to set aside part of the bonus just for her. A little party at her favorite place, that new bike she'd been eyeing, and maybe even a weekend trip for just the two of us. But then there was Adam. We'd been together nearly 5 years, and in the beginning he was so full of energy and big dreams. Always brimming with ideas, talking about making it big, and I fell hard for that ambition. Over time, though, it started to feel like one reckless plan after another. Each one was a sure thing, until it wasn't. Yet, this time, he seemed more fired up than ever. He was absolutely convinced that his latest scheme, a venture in crypto trading, something he barely knew anything about, was going to make us rich. Just hearing him pitch it set off a few alarms in my mind. One evening, while we were having dinner, I mentioned the plans I'd been making for Emma's birthday, hoping for a simple, happy reaction. Instead, Adam's eyes flashed with something else, something I couldn't quite place. Excitement, or something colder. "That's great," he said, his voice slow, almost like he was calculating something. "But hear me out. What if we invested that money in my business instead? Think about the returns, babe. We could end up with way more for her future than just one special birthday." I gripped my fork a little tighter. Here we go again, I thought. Adam, it's her birthday. She deserves this day to be about her. Besides, I've already invested in some of your ideas before and, well, let's just say we haven't seen much come back from them. He scoffed like I'd insulted him. "So you don't believe in me anymore? This time's different. I've got a solid lead. A guy I met online who's a pro at this stuff. He says it's low risk, high reward." The alarm bells went from a buzz to a roar. "A guy you met online?" I asked, trying to sound curious instead of outright skeptical. "Does he have any proof? Any kind of success track record?" He rolled his eyes and waved his hand, clearly annoyed. "You just don't get it. This is the future. Crypto is huge right now, and if we don't jump in, we'll miss our chance." I took a slow breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "Adam, she's only going to turn 12 once. This money is going towards her birthday, and that's final." For a second, he looked genuinely hurt, like I'd stomped all over his dreams. But then, Adam's expression shifted to something cold and unrecognizable. "Fine. Be selfish," he said, voice dripping with resentment. "Go ahead. Throw away our future for one lousy day." The tension after that was suffocating. I felt torn between wanting to give Emma the birthday she deserved and dealing with Adam's relentless pressure to invest in his newest scheme. For the next week, he barely spoke to me, resorting instead to snide, passive-aggressive comments whenever he could. Over breakfast, he'd grumble about missed chances or mutter something about wasting potential as he passed me in the hall. It was wearing me down. Then, just a few days before Emma's birthday, things escalated. I walked in from work to find Adam sitting in the living room with two strangers. One was a tall man in a sharp suit, the other a younger guy in a hoodie. I had never seen either of them before. "Babe," Adam greeted me, forcing a cheery tone. "I want you to meet Tom and Eric, the guys I told you about. They're here to help us get started with this crypto thing." My stomach sank. He hadn't even mentioned they'd be coming over. Tom, the guy in the suit, extended his hand with a wide, polished smile. "I hear you're a bit skeptical about crypto," he said smoothly, his grin a little too perfect for comfort. Eric, the younger guy, barely looked up from his phone, just nodding in my direction. I forced myself to smile, even though irritation was bubbling inside me. "It's not that I'm against it, exactly," I said carefully. "But I'd need to see some real numbers, maybe some actual success stories." Tom chuckled, throwing a knowing glance at Adam. "Smart woman you've got here. Don't worry, we're not here to pressure you. We just want to show you the potential. With that, they launched into a lengthy spiel about blockchain, coins, and investments, tossing around jargon I barely understood. The more they talked, the more unsettled I felt. They seemed too smooth, their pitch too polished, like it was something they'd rehearsed and delivered countless times. I tried to voice my concerns, but Tom just smiled and nodded as if I were a child he was humoring. Finally, I couldn't hold back. "Look," I said, cutting in, "right now my focus is on my daughter's birthday. It's a big day for her, and I'm not about to gamble her celebration away." Eric looked up, giving me a sharp, annoyed look. "It's not gambling. It's investing," he said, his tone dripping with condescension, as if explaining something to a stubborn child. That was it for me. "Thank you for coming, but this just isn't the right time," I said firmly. The moment they left, Adam lost it. "Why are you so against me?" he yelled. "They came all the way over here to show you this opportunity, and you just threw it back in their faces." I stood my ground, keeping my voice calm. "Adam, I'm not taking money set aside for Emma's birthday and putting it into something I don't even understand. I've already put money into your projects before, and we haven't exactly hit the jackpot." He looked at me, his face a mix of anger and desperation. "You don't believe in me, do you?" I took a slow breath, choosing my words carefully. "It's not about that, Adam. It's about priorities. Emma deserves this day. She's been through a lot this year, Adam. I'm not about to disappoint her." That was all I managed to say before he stormed out, slamming the door behind him. He didn't come home that night, and when he finally walked in the next morning, he looked like he hadn't slept a wink. Without a word, he trudged straight to bed. The tension over the next few days was suffocating, but I forced myself to push through. I ordered the cake, arranged the decorations, and made reservations at Emma's favorite restaurant. Despite Adam's icy silence, I felt oddly at peace, like I was finally putting her first and doing something right. But the day before the party, I noticed something strange in our bank account. My heart sank as I scrolled through the transactions and saw it. A large sum of money had been transferred out. It was almost the exact amount I'd set aside for Emma's birthday. Dread washed over me as I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. I could barely keep my voice steady when I confronted Adam later. "Did you take money from our account?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. He didn't meet my eyes, shifting his weight uncomfortably. "I told you it was a sure thing. I just borrowed it. We'll get it back and then some." For a second, I was speechless. He'd gone behind my back and drained Emma's birthday fund without even asking. All the effort, the planning, it felt like it had all been yanked out from under me. I felt betrayed, like a knife had twisted right between my shoulders. "But Adam, this was for Emma," I managed, my voice barely a whisper. "You knew that." He finally looked at me, guilt flickering in his eyes, but there was a stubborn edge there too. "I'm doing this for us, for her future. Don't you get that?" I shook my head, tears stinging in my eyes. "No, Adam, you did this for yourself. And now, I don't even know if I can trust you." After that, we barely spoke. The tension between us thickened, and though neither of us wanted to say it out loud, something fundamental had broken. Not that it slowed him down. If anything, he seemed more determined than ever, diving deeper into his so-called business ventures. Then he started mentioning an upcoming business trip, one that seemed to come out of nowhere. The details were vague and kept changing, which set off alarm bells, but I convinced myself I was just overreacting. I mean, I trusted this man with my life, hadn't I? As the trip got closer, though, he was glued to his phone constantly. I'd catch him scrolling through messages, the screen lighting up with notifications that he'd quickly swipe away if I came near. It was clear he was in contact with someone, but he wasn't about to tell me who. One night, I caught a glimpse of a name flash across his screen before he could hide it. Kate. My stomach twisted. I remembered her from a party we'd attended the year before. She was one of his former co-workers, a gorgeous woman with an infectious laugh that seemed to hang in the air. "Who's Kate?" I asked, doing my best to sound casual, though my heart was pounding. Without even glancing up from his phone, he replied, "Just a friend," too quickly for my liking. "Do you usually message your friends like that? Friends? Late at night?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. He scowled, looking irritated. Are we really doing this now? I thought you trusted me. That word, trust, felt like a slap. But I forced myself to drop it, at least for the moment. 2 days later, he left for his so-called business trip, promising to call. Yet the calls were infrequent, short, and always seemed oddly timed. Whenever I asked about his meetings, he'd give vague, dismissive responses and quickly change the subject. Every instinct I had screamed that something was wrong. By the third night of his trip, I couldn't sleep. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing through every worst-case scenario. Part of me felt silly even thinking it, but I couldn't shake the image of Adam out with someone else, laughing, sharing drinks, maybe more. The doubt gnawed at me until I couldn't take it anymore. Finally, I called my best friend, Megan. We'd been confidants since college, and if anyone could help me make sense of this mess, it was her. The words came tumbling out the moment she answered. I think he's cheating. There was a long, heavy silence. Then Megan sighed, her voice hesitant. I didn't want to say anything, but I've noticed he's been acting strange too. I saw him at the bar a couple of times, and he wasn't alone. My heart sank. Who was he with? I don't know her, Megan admitted. But it could have been Kate. I didn't get a clear look. Her words hung in the air, each one like a knife twisting deeper. The sickening feeling of betrayal bubbled up inside me. I knew I needed proof, something solid. That night, I packed a small bag and booked an early flight, telling myself that if I was wrong, I'd apologize. Maybe even laugh this off. But if I was right, well, I needed to know. I landed early the next morning and went straight to our house. The moment I walked in, something felt off. A faint smell lingered in the air. A perfume, distinctly floral and definitely not mine. My heart pounded as I moved through the house, noticing small details that didn't belong. A wine glass on the counter, lipstick smudged on the rim, and a pair of unfamiliar heels by the door. It was like I'd stumbled into a stranger's life, into a version of my home that didn't belong to me. I crept up the stairs, pulse hammering in my ears. When I pushed open our bedroom door, I spotted it immediately. A folded note on the bedside table, written in handwriting that wasn't mine. My hands shook as I picked it up, my eyes scanning the words. It was a love note, signed with a simple K, promising to meet again soon. The room spun as the realization hit me, and I felt sick. Every suspicion, every horrible doubt. It was all right there. He'd brought her here into our home. The betrayal cut so deep, I could hardly breathe. I knew I had to confront him, but the last thing I wanted was to give him the satisfaction of seeing me fall apart. I waited until he got home, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing me fall apart. When he finally walked through the door that evening, his face flashed with surprise, and then guilt, as he saw me standing there, clutching the note. I held it up, my voice trembling with rage but barely above a whisper. Care to explain this? For a moment, he stood there, silent, his eyes darting from the note to my face. I can explain, he started weakly. I let out a bitter laugh. Can you? Because it seems pretty clear to me, Adam. He ran a hand through his hair, looking more like a trapped animal than the confident man I'd once fallen for. It was just a mistake, he stammered. It didn't mean anything. A fresh wave of anger washed over me. A mistake? Bringing her here into our home? That's not a mistake, Adam. That's a choice. His shoulders slumped, but he didn't deny it. And that silence told me all I needed to know. In the days that followed, I went into full detective mode. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this story, more layers of betrayal hidden just beneath the surface. I started checking his emails, his social media, his messages, all things I'd never even considered before because I'd never felt the need. Now, every notification felt like a possible clue, and it didn't take long to uncover the truth, in all its ugly details. There were texts going back months, full of flirtation, late-night plans, and promises. But the worst discovery was about Emma. He hadn't just cheated on me. He'd woven this woman into Emma's life. They'd been going on father-daughter outings I'd thought were just for them. She'd been there too, Kate. They'd gone to the zoo, amusement parks, even on overnight trips, all without my knowledge. It was like my entire world was collapsing around me. One evening, I showed Megan everything I'd uncovered. My voice was thick with disbelief. He didn't just betray me. He brought her into Emma's life, like they were some kind of family. Megan's face mirrored the horror and disgust I felt. She was silent for a long time before finally speaking. "This is unforgivable. You can't let him get away with this." I nodded, feeling numb. "I don't intend to." When I confronted Adam about involving Emma, he immediately tried to defend himself, scrambling to justify the unjustifiable. "She was just a friend to Emma. All right? Emma didn't even know we were involved." I scoffed. "That doesn't make it any better, Adam. You introduced her to our daughter, took her on trips with her. You've crossed every line." In the weeks that followed, I struggled to keep it together for Emma. She could tell something was wrong. She wasn't oblivious. But I tried my hardest to shield her from the worst of it. I didn't want her to feel like her world was crumbling, even though mine was. But every time I looked at her, I was flooded with guilt. How had it come to this? How had I let this happen? How had I stayed silent, letting Adam weave his web of deceit right under my nose? The decision to confront him was inevitable, but that didn't make it any easier. I spent days agonizing over what I'd say, how I'd hold myself together in the face of whatever excuses he'd throw my way. Adam was a smooth talker, skilled at twisting words to make me doubt my own perceptions. But this time I had concrete proof. I knew the full extent of his betrayal, and I knew what I needed to do. The confrontation came one cold Tuesday evening. Thankfully, Emma was staying at my sister's, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing at home. Adam walked in from work, casually scrolling on his phone as he stepped into the living room. I waited until he sat down before I stepped into his line of sight, a stack of printed messages clutched tightly in my hand. "We need to talk." My voice sounded strange, tight with days of pent-up fury. He glanced up, his face shifting from casual indifference to cautious surprise as he registered my expression. "Is something wrong?" I held up the stack of messages. "Do you recognize these?" For a split second, panic flickered across his face, but he quickly masked it with a shrug. "What are those?" "Messages, emails, photos, proof of what you've been doing behind my back for months." My voice trembled but stayed firm. "Proof that you not only betrayed me, but that you also lied to Emma, dragged her into this mess." He shifted uncomfortably, trying to feign innocence, which only infuriated me more. "Look, you're blowing this out of proportion. Kate and I, it wasn't serious. It was just a phase, something I needed to." "A phase?" I could barely keep my voice steady. "You call lying to your family and sneaking around with another woman a phase?" I shook my head. "This wasn't a one-time mistake, Adam. You made choice after choice. And you had the audacity to involve Emma." He raised his hands defensively, his tone exasperated. "Emma doesn't know anything, okay? She just thought Kate was a friend of mine. That's it." I let out a bitter, hollow laugh. "And you think that makes it better? She trusted you, Adam. We trusted you. And you think it's fine because you kept her in the dark?" Adam stood up, running his hands through his hair, looking like he was trying to figure out his next move. "I don't know what you want me to say. I'm sorry. Okay? I messed up. But we can work through this, right? We've been together for years. We have Emma. Are you really going to throw all of that away over one mistake?" "One mistake," I repeated, my voice seething. "Adam, this wasn't a single mistake. You built a life behind my back. You lied to me over and over again. You lied to Emma, too. And now you want me to just pretend it didn't happen." He looked at me, searching my face, but I could see he still didn't understand. In his mind, this was something he could talk his way out of, something he could smooth over with a few half-hearted apologies. But he didn't grasp the depth of the damage he'd caused. And that's when I knew. There was no going back. "Promises you never planned to keep," I said, my voice low but steady. "I'm done, Adam." The finality in my words seemed to hit him like a slap. "I can't keep living this way. You've shattered every ounce of trust one had. and I won't stay in a marriage built on lies. I'm leaving. He stared at me, stunned, looking genuinely hurt, as if the reality of his actions was only now dawning on him. You can't be serious, he whispered. You'd really throw everything away? What about Emma? Hearing her name felt like a punch to the gut. I tried so hard to protect her, to shield her from this truth. But in my silence, I'd let her down too, allowing Adam the space to pull her into his twisted games. That realization stung deeply, and I could feel the tears welling up, but I forced them back. I refused to let him see me break. Emma deserves better than this, I said, my voice shaking but determined. She deserves a home built on honesty, not lies. And right now, I need to be the parent she can rely on. I can't do that if I'm here, letting you manipulate us both. His face darkened, disbelief and anger flashing across his expression. So that's it, he demanded. You're just going to walk out, destroy our family over one mistake? I took a steadying breath. No, Adam. You destroyed our family the moment you decided your lies and deceit were more important than us. Without waiting for a response, I turned and left the room. I didn't want to hear any more excuses or let him try to talk me out of the decision I'd made. I headed upstairs to gather my things, each step heavy with the weight of memories we'd built together. But every one of those memories felt tainted now, like a lie I'd been too blind to see. The next morning, I went straight to the bank. Over the years, I'd managed to save a bit, though it wasn't enough to start over entirely. Then I remembered the account I'd set aside for Emma's birthday, the money that had been meant for her big day before Adam took it without a second thought. Seeing the balance, a wave of guilt washed over me. That money wasn't just about a celebration. It had been a promise to make her feel special, to give her something that was ours alone. In letting Adam convince me otherwise, I realized I'd failed her in more ways than I'd known. I closed the account and transferred the remaining funds into my personal savings. I knew it would be a while before I could do something special for Emma again, but I had to start somewhere. I had to rebuild not just for myself, but for her too. As I left the bank, a strange mix of sadness and relief settled over me. The life I'd known, the life I'd fought to build, was over. But in the empty space it left behind, I felt a faint glimmer of something else. A sense of hope for the life I'd rebuild on my own terms. After I'd made the final decision to leave Adam and began planning a future without him, the messages started coming in. From his family, mostly. First, it was his sister, Katie. We'd always gotten along reasonably well, but Katie was the kind of person who'd side with Adam, no matter the situation. One morning, while I was boxing up my things, my phone rang. Katie's name flashed on the screen, and my first impulse was to ignore it. I didn't need another lecture or a guilt trip, not when I was finally ready to move on. But some part of me, maybe curiosity or maybe a need for closure, made me answer. Hello. I kept my voice steady, bracing myself for whatever she'd say. Hey. Katie's voice sounded unexpectedly gentle, almost pleading. Look, I know things are complicated right now, but I wanted to talk before you make any final decisions. I sighed, gripping the phone a little tighter. Katie, I think it's a little late for that. Your brother made his choices, and I'm done being the one who has to pick up the pieces. She paused, but then her voice took on a more urgent tone. I get that, but think about Emma. She's caught in the middle of all this, and she doesn't understand why everything's changing so fast. She adores you. Please don't punish her for Adam's mistakes. The mention of Emma made my heart clench. It wasn't that I didn't care. I loved her like my own daughter. But the wounds from Adam's betrayal were too fresh, and I couldn't see a way forward without being constantly reminded of what he'd done. I'm not trying to punish Emma. Katie, I replied, struggling to keep the frustration out of my voice. But I have to think about myself too. I can't keep pretending everything's fine when it's not. And Emma, she's better off without this constant tension in her life. There was a pause, and for a second, I thought Katie might understand. But then she spoke again, her tone turning more insistent. At least don't cancel the holiday plans. Emma's been talking about it nonstop, and I think she needs something to hold on to right now. I bit my lip, feeling torn. The holiday had been planned months ago. a chance for all of us to spend time together as a family. But now, the idea of celebrating anything felt like a cruel joke. Every time I thought of that trip, I was only reminded of the lies Adam had spun around us. I just don't think I can go through with it, I admitted, feeling the familiar ache of guilt and frustration settle in. I don't want to put on a happy face and pretend like everything is okay. Katie sighed, her voice softening. You don't have to do this for Adam. Do it for Emma. She's already had so much taken away from her. Let her have this one thing. As I listened, something shifted inside me. I felt the weight of my own pain, but I also felt the pull of Emma's innocence in all of this. She hadn't asked for any of this upheaval, and maybe, just maybe, she deserved to hold onto a little piece of normalcy in the storm her father had created. Anger simmered under my skin. Why was it always on me to hold things together, to be the one who sacrificed? Adam had created this mess, yet somehow I was expected to clean it up, to keep everything steady for his sake. I clenched the phone tighter, my voice steady and firm in a way that surprised even me. No, Katie, I've done enough pretending. If Adam wants to give her that holiday, he's welcome to try. But I'm done covering for him. I'm not going to keep helping him keep up this facade. Katie fell silent, and then, after a moment, she spoke again, disappointment clear in her voice. I didn't think you'd be this selfish. The word hit like a slap. But I stayed calm, letting the words come out without a trace of apology. Selfish, Katie? I spent years putting Adam's needs above mine, pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. If choosing honesty and protecting my sanity makes me selfish, then fine. I ended the call before she could respond, the anger still smoldering. In the days after I left Adam, I faced some of the hardest moments of my life. Yet, at the same time, I felt an incredible sense of freedom. I no longer had to tiptoe around his moods or live under the weight of his lies. I found a small apartment on the other side of town, a place where Emma and I could finally start fresh. But as I settled into this new life, the full reality of what had happened started to sink in. Everything had changed, and not just for me. Over time, word filtered back to me about Adam's situation. Friends and even some of his family reached out, each with new stories of the fallout he was facing. Then one evening, Megan called, her voice barely able to contain her excitement. You won't believe this, she said, practically laughing. Kate dumped him. Just like that. She's gone. A strange mix of emotions washed over me. I had half expected it, but the confirmation was still a jolt. So, she just left? Oh yeah, Megan said with a scoff. The second she realized he had nothing left to offer her. No money, no stability, just the mess he created. Turns out, she wasn't interested in playing the supportive girlfriend. I shook my head, almost feeling sorry for him. Almost. Well, he wanted the thrill of an affair, I murmured. Guess he got exactly what he wanted. But while Adam's personal life was unraveling, his relationship with Emma was falling apart too. I tried to shield her from the worst of it, but she was old enough to sense that everything had changed. The day I moved out, I'd let her stay with Adam, hoping to ease the transition. But it didn't take long before she grew uncomfortable there. One night, I got a call from her, and I could hear the strain in her voice, every word laced with sadness. Mom, she whispered, clearly fighting back tears, can I come stay with you? Dad, he's just different now. Her small, broken voice cut right through me. Hearing Emma's small, broken voice tore me apart. Of course, honey. You're always welcome here. Do you want me to come get you? There was a long pause. I think so. He's been acting strange ever since you left. He's either angry or really quiet, and he barely talks to me. I don't feel like he's my dad anymore. It was painfully clear that the weight of his choices was finally bearing down on him. But instead of facing it like an adult, he'd withdrawn, leaving Emma alone to deal with the fallout. That was the last straw. I picked her up that night, and as she settled into the spare bedroom, she curled up under the blankets like she was hiding from the world. I sat beside her, brushing her hair back as she finally let the tears flow. I don't understand, Mom, she whispered through her sobs. Why did Dad have to do all this? Why couldn't he just be there for us? I didn't have a perfect answer, but I tried my best. Sometimes people make big mistakes, sweetheart. And sometimes, those mistakes change everything. In the weeks that followed, Emma grew quieter, more withdrawn. She rarely spoke about her father, and when she did, there was a bitterness in her tone that I'd never heard before. It broke my heart to see her hurt, to watch that light in her eyes dim because of his actions. Meanwhile, Adam's life continued to spiral. Without me to cover for him financially, he was struggling to pay the bills, and his business ventures were crumbling, one after another. He reached out to me a few times, each message sounding more desperate than the last. At first, he tried to blame me, accusing me of abandoning him when he needed me most. But over time, his messages shifted to pleas, asking for just a little help to get back on his feet. I held my ground. I knew that helping him now would only allow him to escape the consequences he needed to face. He had to understand there was a price for the choices he'd made. Then, one evening, I got another call from his sister, Katie. She tried to stay neutral throughout it all, but now, even she was starting to lose patience. "You know he's falling apart, right?" she said, her voice tinged with a mix of accusation and frustration. I took a deep breath, holding back the flood of emotions her words stirred. "Katie, I didn't make these choices for him. He did this to himself." "I know," she admitted, sounding almost defeated. "But he's our brother. We never thought it would come to this." "Neither did I," I replied quietly. "But there's no going back now." As the months passed, Emma and I slowly adjusted to our new life. We rebuilt together, creating new routines, finding joy in the little things. She was healing, even if there were scars that might never fully fade. And while a part of me felt a pang of regret for what we'd lost, I knew deep down that we were better off now, finally free from the lies and shadows we'd once lived under. The betrayal that had once defined our lives was finally behind us, leaving Adam isolated and hollow, a mere echo of the man he used to be. Though it was an excruciating journey, I found an unexpected sense of peace in knowing that Emma and I now had a real chance for a better, brighter future. One founded on trust, honesty, and a hard-fought freedom. In the months that followed my decision to leave, a quiet calm settled over my life. The relentless turmoil and tension that once dominated my days were gone. Now it was just Emma and me moving forward slowly, but with a certainty I hadn't felt in years. There was relief in the emptiness Adam had left, like a space finally cleared to rebuild on my own terms. I poured myself into making a safe, warm home for Emma. Our little apartment wasn't grand, but I made sure it was filled with things that made her feel secure. I painted her room in her favorite color, and on weekends, we explored the neighborhood, discovering little parks, hidden cafes, and a tiny art gallery that became our shared secret haven. Even at work, things began to change. Without the weight of Adam's endless needs and schemes, I found a renewed focus and energy. I began taking on new projects, working closely with Sarah, my supervisor who had become a close friend. Sarah was fearless and blunt, everything I hadn't allowed myself to be. She knew the wreckage I'd survived with Adam and was the first to plant the idea of a fresh start in my mind. "Have you thought about moving?" she asked one afternoon over coffee, her eyes studying me closely. "Like a real change? A new place where you can just start over?" I glanced around the office, the place I'd worked for over a decade. "I don't know," I replied, the words cautious. "It's terrifying. Emma and I have already been through so much. How could I ask her to start over again?" Sarah's smile was gentle but knowing. "Sometimes the only way forward is to leap, even if you don't know where you'll land." Her words stuck with me. Maybe she was right. Maybe it was time to leave every painful reminder of Adam's betrayal behind, to start somewhere fresh. Over the next few weeks, I secretly researched job openings in other cities. It was terrifying but exhilarating, the first major decision I'd made purely for myself in a long time. One Saturday morning, as Emma and I made breakfast together, a sharp knock interrupted the quiet. Surprised, I opened the door cautiously to find Katie standing there, her face drawn with an uneasy expression. She was fidgeting with her bag, her eyes darting around the apartment as though she were trespassing on sacred ground. "Katie?" I asked, my surprise turning to wariness. "What are you doing here?" She forced a tense smile. "I just thought I'd drop by and see how you and Emma are doing." I hesitated but invited her in, watching as she settled uncomfortably on the couch. Emma was in her room, leaving just the two of us in the stillness of the living room. Katie looked around, her gaze lingering on Emma's freshly painted room, taking in the simplicity of our new life. There was something unsettling about her presence, like she was struggling to reconcile the woman I had become with the person she used to know. Her eyes finally met mine, searching, as if waiting for a sign of weakness. But I held her gaze steady, unflinching. With Emma in her room, it was just Katie and me, alone in the quiet living room. She seemed to struggle with her words, and I knew she hadn't come just for a friendly visit. Finally, she took a breath and spoke up. "Look, I know things have been difficult, but Adam's really struggling. He's lost his job and he's barely getting by." Her voice trailed off as she looked at me, waiting expectantly. I knew exactly what she was implying. They wanted me to help him, to support him in some way. It was the same old story. Every time he hit rock bottom, his family came to me to pick up the pieces. I took a deep breath, feeling a strange calmness settle over me. "Katie, I understand that this is hard for him," I said, steady and firm. "But Adam made his choices, and he needs to live with the consequences." Her face twisted in frustration. "But he's family. You can't just abandon him." I met her gaze, unwavering. "He may be Emma's father, yes, but he stopped being my responsibility the moment he chose to betray us. I gave him everything I had, and I'm not doing it anymore." Katie stared at me, shock and disappointment clear in her expression. She was so used to me giving in, bending over backward to fix things, to make everything right. But not this time. "I don't know who you are anymore," she whispered, her voice sharp with accusation. I held her gaze calmly. "I'm someone who finally knows her own worth." Katie left shortly after, her silence echoing through the room. Her visit only reinforced my resolve. For years, I had let Adam and his family pull me into their drama, dictate my decisions, and manipulate my kindness. But I was done. This was my life now, and I was determined to protect it. A few weeks later, I received an offer for a job in a different city. A fresh start that would allow Emma and me to leave everything behind. It was a position I'd only dreamed of, a role that felt like a sign from the universe itself. When I shared the news with Emma, her eyes went wide with excitement. "Really? We're moving?" she asked, barely able to contain her joy. I nodded, feeling my own spirits lift as her enthusiasm spread. "Yes, sweetheart. It's a new adventure. Just for us." On the day we left, I felt a mix of sadness and relief, a bittersweet goodbye to the life I'd tried so hard to hold together. As we drove out of town, I glanced in the rearview mirror, watching the city fade into the distance. Emma was in the back seat, chattering excitedly about her new school and the friends she hoped to make. I felt a surge of gratitude, a deep sense of peace that I hadn't known in years. This was our fresh start, a new beginning, free from the shadows of the past. For the first time in a long time, I felt genuinely free, ready to live life on my own terms, unburdened by anyone else's baggage. And I was determined that, from this point forward, that freedom was ours to keep.
Bye bye.